Senior producer from NFL Films, Greg Cosell, joins us to break down our matchup this weekend between Washington and Buffalo. And Greg, thanks for joining us as always, first. And then second, let's start with the positive from last week, a pass rush that looked like it got shot out of a cannon for Buffalo against Miami.
Well, not only were individuals pass rushing extremely well, like Rousseau, like Epinesa, but I was kind of surprised by the blitz percentage. I mean, how much pressure they put on the Dolphins, which was obviously game plan for Tua, and he went out, and they stayed with that approach. And all the multiple front looks, they had 6- and 7-man front looks, and that puts a lot of stress on pass protection because you don't know who's coming and who's not coming. I mean, they had snaps where Edmonds was lined up on the edge. They had a double A gap look where it was Rousseau and Hughes in the A gap. They did so much with their fronts, and then a lot of different pressure looks came off that. They also, guys, had a lot of 4-man pressures where Milano was the 4th rusher, and Rousseau dropped into coverage. So they showed an awful lot to the Dolphins. The Dolphins' O-line struggled with it, and it was really a dominating defensive performance.
Was there a player from that game in the film that you watched that you think really outperformed maybe what you expected or really excelled in all the assignments that he was given watching the Miami Bills game back?
Well, Maddie, I don't think he outperformed because I think he's a terrific player. But I feel that I could make an argument, and again, Leslie Frazier might tell me I'm wrong, but I think I can make an argument that Matt Milano is the most important player on this defense, because they ask him to do an awful lot of things. Now, the safeties are really good too, and they're asked to do a lot as well. But I think Milano is an absolutely terrific player. And like I said, he fills many roles. He has a lot of responsibilities. And as you guys know, coaches don't ask players to do a lot of things unless they feel they can do them. So I just think Matt Milano is a really, really good player. He's used as a blitzer. He matches up to tight ends man-to-man. He plays the more normal assignments we associate with linebackers in the run game. But I think he's a multi-dimensional linebacker who's kind of explosive in his own way.
Flipping it over to the other side, a very balanced approach, Greg, by the offense. 33 passes, 30 runs in the game, which they really only did a couple of times all last season. So you look at the approach they had last Sunday offensively, and you know, I think it was certainly effective, and then the score on the board only encouraged them to run it all the more, shorten the game. Correct. Kind of thing. Do you expect that the Bills could turn to a balanced approach like this going forward in a given week?
Only if Josh Allen continues to struggle. I think that last week's game, in terms of the numbers you put out there, Chris, was a function of the game. I don't think that's the way they want to play and the way they went into this season expecting to play. But Josh, quite honestly, and the film tells you this, has struggled a bit. So I think given that they were up 14-0 and then it was 21-0 after their first third quarter drive, I think the game played out that they could hand the ball off and the numbers became balanced. And balance is a relative term in the NFL, guys, as you well know. Few teams are 50-50 the way it was years and years ago. A team like the Ravens is certainly like that. But for the most part in this league, it's 60, 65, 40, 35. That's really considered balance. Teams throw the ball more than they run it.
Well, you mentioned Josh Allen struggling, and he surely has not had the start to the season that he had in 2020. His completion percentage is down. His efficiency in a lot of ways is down, but still he's been able to put together some really impressive drives and has shown his old self or his 2020 self in some of those drives and impressive throws that he's made through 2 weeks. But when you dissect the tape and when you're looking at how he's done in the last 2 weeks, what are some ways that you think he has been struggling and maybe not looking like how he did last year?
Well, really, Maddie, it all stems from ball placement because he's missed these first 2 weeks throws that he did not miss a year ago that are routine throws by NFL standards. So it's just been ball placement. There's always talk with Josh about his lower body mechanics because he's such a talented arm thrower that his whole life he probably did not worry a whole lot about having his feet set. Last year, he certainly did a better job with that. I imagine it's something that he has to constantly work on just because he's used to his whole life throwing a certain way. But he's missed too many throws that you have to make. And there's been some throws where he threw the ball too hard. On some deeper throws, I'm not talking about way deep throws, but just deeper type throws, he's thrown the ball too flat with no trajectory. And when that happens, you have literally no margin for error. I think he missed one week one to Sanders on a seam ball that should have been a walk-in touchdown. He, those are the issues right now. One would expect that he'll get better because we've seen him play at a really high level, and it could just be he's working through it. I know he did play that one first half in the preseason, but other than that, didn't get a lot of work. So we'll see. But he's certainly not been through two games what he was last year, and obviously needs to be. I thought his best play of the game, believe it or not, was the first play of the third quarter when he hit Beasley for 22 yards, because that was a play that was meant for man coverage, and it was not man coverage. And he read it exactly and made the right throw. So that was the play that actually impressed me the most.
Yeah, and I agree with the lower body mechanics because even he has said that he feels he's more accurate when his feet are flat on the ground and he's not bouncing, because when he bounces, sometimes he's susceptible to overstriding into the throw or throwing it in mid-bounce when his lower half is literally moving.
Yes.
So he's worked with Jordan Palmer a lot on keeping both of his feet flat to deliver the ball more accurately. So hopefully he gets back to more of
and
that.
I would imagine he will. But, right now some quarterbacks just go through some struggles. It started really with his first throw of the game when he just threw the hitch to Diggs and he threw it, way too high. I mean, that's just a routine throw.
Yeah. Speaking of quarterbacks, let's look at Taylor Heineke. This is a guy who has shown some moxie. I mean, he showed me a lot in that playoff game against the Bucs last year.
Yeah.
Going toe-to-toe with Tom Brady. So, 300-yard game last week, and, they pull it out on a gaffe on special teams by the Giants. What can we say about how you might try to limit his effectiveness if you're the Bills' defense?
Well, let's talk about what kind of player he is.
Yeah.
He's obviously does not have a big arm, but he's got a very refined sense of timing. He makes a lot of throws early because that's his game. He's probably always been like that. He's not big and he does not have a big arm, so he's always had to be a timing thrower. I think he has very good recognition. I think he sees things. So therefore he throws to the right receiver at the right time. And I think that's his strength. So, how do you respond to that? I would not surprise me to see the Bills continue to be aggressive with pressure. I think this is an offensive line that they probably feel that they can, create some issues for. But Heineke's not going to drive the ball down the field, guys. That's not his game. He doesn't have the arm to do that. Look, he's playing. He certainly showed well against the Giants. He showed well against Tampa, Chris, in the game you mentioned in the playoffs a year ago, which I thought was a really well-coached game by the offense. I thought they really presented throws for him, and that's what he needs to some degree. He needs the throws to be presented for him. The only throw he really threw down the field against the Giants was the 51-yarder to McKissick. It was an out and up, and that's not really an arm-strained throw. That's more of a fade throw.
Well, Terry McLaurin is definitely their best receiver on that team, and someone that Heineke gets to look to. And he had a pretty good game against the Giants, over 100 yards receiving. But when he played the Bills circa 2019, they held him to just 4 receptions for 39 yards. It's someone that our cornerbacks and Tre'Davious White thinks that he's a really good receiver. How can our secondary limit his big playability and the ability to kind of be a game changer for that side of the offense?
Well, I'm kind of fascinated to see how the Bills will play this, because normally Tre'Davious White plays boundary corner. This week he played right corner with Wallace and then Jackson when Wallace got hurt playing left corner. We know there have been times over the last couple of years that White has been a matchup corner, but that's not primarily their MO. They don't automatically use White as a matchup corner. They could well do that. You know, McLaurin lines up in multiple spots outside in the slot. He runs multiple route concepts. So it's very possible, since there are other, wide receivers. I mean, they play a rookie, De'Ami Brown from North Carolina, so he's a rookie. So they don't really have another wide receiver that I think you go into a game saying, hey, we got to stop this guy. So it's very possible that this could be one of those games where White is a matchup corner, because they have done that, like I said, at times throughout White's career. It's just not their normal MO.
And then Logan Thomas is a player that Bills fans are certainly familiar with. He started his quarterback to tight end transition here, had a breakout season last year, and he's a tall target. I mean, he's like 6'7". Maybe just explain, based on your film study of him, why that height and length is such a matchup problem for defenses.
Well, height's always a matchup problem. Height is an attribute. We rarely think of it in those terms, but height is an attribute. And the thing that really stood out to me, I actually did a deep dive, Chris, on all his targets this summer from last year when he had the breakout year. And I was quite honestly surprised in a positive way at sort of how refined he was as a route runner and his understanding of how to run routes against different defenses. Now, maybe that comes from the fact that he was a quarterback his whole life. But I think he's an improving player. I think he's an ascending player. What that means in terms of receptions, who can answer that? But he's a difficult matchup. He's a big man. He can work the middle of the field effectively. He's actually got very good hands. He's got a wide catching radius. For someone who did not begin his career and has not played receiver his whole career, he looks like a guy that has been doing it for a long time.
And if we flip to the other side of the ball, I mean, this Washington football team's defense from last year, a lot of people thought, wow, this is going to be a really stellar top of the line defense for the 2021 season because of the defensive front that they have and the draft picks that they've spent on that defensive line. But so far through 2 games, they haven't been really anything amazing. They're allowing 407 total yards per game. They're blitzing at the highest rate, but they're also letting teams convert a lot of third downs, letting teams score a decent amount of points against them too. So in your film study, how would you explain what the defensive line has been up to, or a lack of what they've been able to do in the first 2 weeks?
I think that maybe with the exception of Jonathan Allen, who's played well, that they've just not generated the pass rush from their down 4 that everybody assumed, including myself, would happen. You can go back to week 1 when they played against the Chargers, and the rookie left tackle Slater from Northwestern was tremendous, both in pass protection against Chase Young and Montez Sweat. And then last week against the Giants, that Giants O-line, which had not been particularly good at all in the preseason, in fact was poor, they did a good job. Now, I thought that Daniel Jones in that game also made some excellent throws from a collapsing pocket where they did close it down, and he made some really good throws. But overall, they've not generated the kind of consistent pressure that many, including myself, thought they would, and that's been a little bit of a concern. Now, from a coverage standpoint, they play more split safety, 2 shell coverage than any other coverage, and so there's ways to attack that, obviously, everybody knows, but they have not gotten the pass rush, and that's been an issue.
I'm very curious, and some of our fans that have chimed in with us on the show today, Greg, are curious as to the approach the Bills will take offensively. You obviously have respect for the talent that defensive front can throw at any offense, but at the same time, as we've just discussed, they haven't been tremendously effective. But I think they're a talented group that in any given week can break out. So I'm wondering, do you use a run game here to set up an effective play action game and try to mess with them that way? What do you think is the best way to kind of keep that pass rush at bay and not let it break out this week against the Bills?
Boy, there's there's many approaches one could take.
Yeah.
I certainly don't know the answer to that, Chris. I don't think that they're a running team in a strict sense, the Bills.
Right.
Which is not to say they don't want to run the ball effectively. Of course they want to run it effectively, but I don't think their MO is going to dramatically change. I don't think they're going to come out and look like the Tennessee Titans. I think ultimately this offense is still based on Josh. Now, obviously, they did not spread it out as much this week. The game didn't dictate that. I think after having 24 snaps of 10 personnel week 1, they only had 5 this week. Obviously they reined it in a little, but the game also allowed them to rein it in. We'll see how this game plays out. They probably are going to go into this game, guys, I would think, believing that Washington will not score 30 or 35. I mean, I don't think they'll believe that going in. Now, no one goes into a game saying we're going to shut them out. That's going to happen every week in the NFL. It doesn't. But if they truly believe that Washington will struggle to score against their defense, then they could, as you suggest, Chris, be a little more balanced and let the game play out. But I also think they want to get Josh going because I think everybody in the AFC knows that you've got to beat the Chiefs, and you don't beat the Chiefs 17-13. Correct. So, ultimately they're going to have to get Josh going and the pass game going. Now, it's a long season. This is week 3 of 17 games. So everything doesn't have to happen this Sunday.
Yeah. So if I could just follow up on that real quick, Matty. So with their coverage, Washington, we know that they take the rookie and put him on the field, Benjamin St. Juste, when they go into nickel, but they move Fuller, I think it is, inside.
Fuller goes into the slot.
Yeah.
St. Juste is normally on the right corner. They did match Jackson up at times last week to Galladay. So if they're going to match up this week, Jackson would clearly be on Diggs.
Yeah, okay. And so with that in mind, do you think that they can spread their corners thin enough and maybe use some 10? Because you're kind of thinking they want to get Josh back to where he was. I'm not saying use a ton of 10 personnel, but a decent amount of 4 wide, maybe more than they did last week.
Well, they could, because if I'm not mistaken, I don't believe Washington has played a snap of dime this season. So if I'm correct, and I believe I am, then if you go 4 wide, then someone has to match up if they want to go man. If they don't go man, then it's okay. But Cameron Curl, who's one of their safeties, for the first part of last season, before Landon Collins got hurt last season, Cameron Curl played a lot of snaps in the slot. So it's possible they could see him as a guy who could match up if need be.
All right, interesting.
Well, their strength is surely their front 4, so it'll be interesting to see what type of game plan that the Bills offense has to kind of get through that front 4, if the front 4 plays a little bit better for them in this week 3 matchup. But you kind of said it, week 3, we don't need to see everything. This is going to be a very long season. There's an extra game this year in the regular season. But what are some benchmark things that you think both teams maybe need to show in week 3 that they have yet to show?
Well, I think Washington would probably like their run game to develop some more consistency, because I think even when Fitzpatrick comes back, assuming he's the starter, it depends, I guess, on Heineke. But I don't think in an ideal world, Washington wants Heineke dropping back 46 plus times in a game. I don't think that's probably the way they'd like to play. So I think they would like Antonio Gibson to really get started and to have a more meaningful run game. And I think for the Bills, they would really like to feel that they can attack any defense, no matter how good it may be, by throwing the football. And they haven't done that with the efficiency through 2 weeks that they did a year ago. So, I think they want to move in that direction. Look, we all know that if the Bills are to go 1 game further than they did a year ago, which means that they'd be in the Super Bowl, that it's going to happen because of their pass game, not because of their run game. And again, that doesn't mean the run game shouldn't count at all, but it's going to be because of Josh Allen and the pass game.
The last one I had for you, Greg, I completely forgot about this matchup, but it's rookie on rookie. Sam Cosmi, the right tackle, and Greg Rousseau, obviously the first-round pick. Now, Cosmi had some tough snaps against Azeez Ojulari last week, another rookie. pass rushers. So what do you envision here with an even longer Rousseau to deal with?
And he had some tough snaps week 1 as well, Chris. So he's been pretty good as a run blocker. He struggled in pass pro. And I've been very impressed with Rousseau. I didn't think he'd be, I don't want to say he's not dominant. That's too strong a word, but I didn't think he'd be this good this fast, because I just didn't love his 2019 tape, and he opted out, of course, in 2020. And Epinesa, I think, has really improved too. Epinesa's body looks different to me. I don't know what he did in the offseason.
He lost 20 pounds.
Well, there you go.
He was 280 at Iowa, and they said they wanted him playing here at 260, believing he could be a more effective edge rusher, 20 pounds lighter, and it's proven true, I think.
Well, there you go. So I was just going to say, just from the tape, I knew he looked different. I didn't know that until you just told me. But I think that, he looks better, but he still has strength in his hands. So, I mean, they clearly have a type of player that they want, because they've drafted Epinesa. Rousseau's played very well. Addison is long, too. So they have a type that they want outside. And even Rousseau got a couple of snaps inside this week. We know they move Addison around. So Cosme, I think, is going to have a real challenge this week, because he's going to get Rousseau. He could get Addison. He could get Hughes. It's going to be a challenge for him, because he's working through what I think we all thought he'd have to work through if he was a starter day 1 in the NFL.
Yeah. Are you good, Maddie?
I'm all good. Thank you so much, Greg.
Appreciate it, guys. Thanks as always.
All right, we'll catch you next Friday. That's NFL Film senior producer Greg Cosell. I almost called him Greg Rousseau. And then we've also be keeping an eye out for you, Greg, on ESPN's NFL matchup show this weekend. Look forward to those all the time.